Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Welcome everybody. Sorry we had a slightly late start today. Just wait for our friends to join us and then we will get started. Welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us. Sorry for the couple of minutes to have kept you waiting. We'll just give it a few moments so we can have our friends join us and then we will jump right in. And walaikum assalam to those who have joined us so far. We've got Cardiff and we've got Germany so far in representation. From Delhi, from Fulham, walaikum assalam. Welcome to all of you. Again, like I said, we'll just give it just a few more moments before jumping in. Oops. Okay. Walaikum assalam from Hamburg. Okay, so what we'll do, I will get started and inshallah those who are going to join us can join us. Okay, so Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu wa sallam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. So welcome back. We are starting here our third session in our short course, Verses on the Verdure. And today we're looking at the earth. And so the title is Nurturing Earth, and the subtitle that summarizes the main underlying theme of today is something about the connection between man and earth. And so the model we've been following in our short course is the model of the life cycle of the seed. And the seed, which is mentioned in the Holy Quran, its whole growth is between heaven and earth. And so heaven, the skies feed the seed what it needs. And that was our lesson of last week. That was dubbed or subtitled Between Hope and Fear. But it's the earth which has to conceal the seed, give the seed a home, allow the water in, and then allow the seed to bring something forth. And so we look at the earth. The Quran has quite a lot to say about the earth. Because how the earth was spread out, flattened, made smooth, made safe, so people could walk on it and live on it. Another huge theme about sites of support for the earth and markers of God's power and related themes. But the angle that concerns us today, we look in this third section, a particular connection man and earth. If you look back between man and earth, the very particular point that man was made to us, represented here simply with the phrase khilafa, to be a representative of God on earth. Bring forth the treasures of the earth, to cultivate the earth, to make civilization on earth. All of these are angles that scholars have given to this word khilafa, to be this representative. The test that took place in the tree, hopefully we'll look at this test a little. You will die in this earth, and then you come out from this earth. Between man and earth. The moment we have done is a reflection on our own cycle. And so that's why the earth as a representative or mirror of man, and man as in our selection today. One second. So, as a summary or an which is various verses about how we relate to the earth's gifts. And finally, the conclusion of this cycle of man through the earth is the rising, the rising of man from the earth. So man's origin, I've dubbed it between heaven and earth, which is also our story of the seed. And that's why we have to look at the layering of parallels. Man is like the seed, and man is like the earth, and man is like the sky. And why is all of this? It's because of this emphasis on man's origin. Very often we're told man is made in the Holy Quran, we're told he's made from turab. Turab is this dry soil, the earth itself. And so it's really important to reflect on this, that your substance is the earth. You are the earth. You are the earth animate. You are the earth with God's secret in it, that spirit that was blown into this fashioned form from earth that we call man. And so this mirroring between man and earth is underlying most of the presentation today, and it comes right from this question of origin. Now, this is simply earth, but in other verses, the phrase is teen, which is clay. And clay, of course, is damp earth. And so this is then water. And so your substance in the description of the Holy Quran is the substance of the entire story of the verdure. The entire story of the seed is your story. You are like that seed. You are from the earth, and you are from the earth watered to make this clay from which you were fashioned. But you just have a mystery, a peculiar mystery to man, which is a breathing from the Spirit of God in you. And so man is this incredible mystery, which when all of creation faces God, it is man who is the most fitting mirror of God. Man who's capable of representing the names of God, the perfections of God. And when you look towards the earth, and the earth, we said, is the treasure chest from which all the plants come out and all the animals feed, man is from that substance. man mirrors earth and man mirrors heaven. And that's why the commentators make a great deal, Muslim writers made a great deal of talking about how all the mysteries of the universe, you find them within man. And so, for example, Al-Biqa'i, in his Quranic commentary on the surah Washamsi Waduhaha, it's a surah that swears an oath by the sun, by the moon, by the day, by the night, by the sky, by the earth, and then by the soul. And so he says, what is this connection then between the human soul and all that has preceded? He says, because all that has preceded has a mirror within the world of man. And so it's quite a fascinating passage. You know, the earth has salty water, it has sweet water. It has canals, and he speaks about the tears, as I think tears could be hot and tears could be cold. And then saliva was I believe, his sweet water. And there's sweat, which is the salty water. And there's canals within us. He speaks of the blood. He speaks of the urine. He speaks of 7 heavens. And he speaks of the, outside of man and within man, the spheres of the intellect. The sun as intellect. And the heart as the moon. And so the passage goes on, and Islamic literature is rich in this idea that you are from earth, and the substance of all that's around you is in you. You are a mirror of everything. And it's because of this particular connection between man and earth that particular duties arise and particular relationships arise. Part of them is a relationship of purity that we touched on last time, that you cannot stand before God until you are purified. And your purification is from the very substance from which you are made. The main substance of purification, of course, is not named in this verse, it is named actually, water. The essence of how you purify yourself in ritual is from water. And if you don't have water, then it's from the sa'id. Sa'id meaning the surface of the earth. And so our cleansing in ritual, so we can stand before God, is from the very same earth from which we were made. In the absence of the water, which was also within the clay of which we were made, water to wash us. And because there's this affinity, and there's this connection, and there's this harmony, that's why we were sent down to represent God on this earth, to bring forth its treasures and to care for it. And so right at the heart of the Quranic injunction of man on earth, man as God's representative on earth, was to make sure man promotes harmony on earth. And that's why the most vilest thing that a man does is what's referred here as corruption in the earth, fasad, ruination. What's the essence of ruin on earth? It's destroying crops and destroying animals. And God does not love corruption. So this is the sense of what it means to be vile, to go against the job of being God's representative, which arises out of this harmony between us and earth. And so these people who destroy the crops, ruin the vegetation, ruin the greenery, destroy the animals, these are the people of ruin. And God loves not these people. And what's the opposite? Those who, in the Quranic expression, literally sell themselves, seeking the pleasure of Allah. What does it mean to sell yourself to Allah in the context of this verse? Is to you put yourself in harmony with God's plan. And what does it mean to be in harmony with God's plan in the context of this verse? Is to maintain the balance, care for the crop, care for the animals, fulfill God's plan in this world. So that's our introduction of speaking about the harmony between man and earth, which is underlying the themes of this passage. Now just a selection of verses about the gifts of the earth. And this is just a selection because, as we've seen, the Quran has a great deal to say about all the earth offers. The particular themes we want to dwell upon today. First of all is its food as it relates to us. And so here's an injunction in the Holy Quran addressing all people. And what's the injunction? Fascinatingly, and I know you're all fasting, but the injunction actually is simply eat. So as part of what we've come down to earth in terms of cultivating the earth is that we are told to direct ourselves and eat of its produce. And the context of this verse is a rebuttal of particular superstitious dietary practices of the pagans of Arabia, who would forbid particular forms of food and allow particular forms of food based on particular superstitious beliefs. And so the Quranic injunction is saying, "Oh, you man, oh men, eat, eat." And eat of what? Eat of whatever is in the earth, which is halal and tayyib. What the commentators say here is that eat of what is halal, and what is halal is what is tayyib. Tayyib means wholesome, pure, good, useful, beneficial, promoting health, promoting nutrition, wholesomeness. And what the commentators say is this is the Quranic rule of what is halal. Everything you're allowed to eat, you're allowed to eat it because it's good for you. It's wholesome. And forbidding what is wholesome is considered chasing after the devil. Because if you remember, the devil seeks to overturn the order, to corrupt this beautiful balance of nature. It's the devil who wants to turn you away from what is wholesome. And the Quran is saying, no, I'm directing you. Whatever is, I'm directing you, eat of what is wholesome. And what is wholesome is the produce of the earth. Because when this passage goes on, it describes what you cannot eat, what is not wholesome. And all of it was what? It was إِنَّمَا حَرَّمَ عَلَيْكُمُ الْمَيْتَةَ, the carcass, وَالدَّمَ, and blood, وَلَحْبَ الْخِنْزِيرِ, the flesh of the swine, وَمَا أُهِلَّ لِغَيْرِ اللَّهِ بِهِ, and that which was slaughtered for other than God. And none of this is from what the earth brings out. So what you get from this is all the food that comes out of the earth is wholesome. All the food that comes out of the earth is pure. All the food that comes out of the earth is nourishing. And therefore all of it is good. All of it is halal, and men eat it, go to it, seek your sustenance from it, because it only brings out what is good for you. And that leads on then to this need to reflect on it. And so here's a passage in Surah Abasa. It starts off by censuring man for not fulfilling God's commandments. And what's the essence of this commandment? It's looking at food. So it's saying man has not fulfilled what God has told him to do. And what's the instruction? Look at your food. If you look at your food, first of all, looking at your food is the commandment. And we've seen this throughout all the verses of our course so far. We have to connect to God, and we connect to God by regarding the greenery, the whole order of nature. But also, looking to food, if you connect and realize the lesson of food, that is what will show you why it is you have to surrender to Him. And if you reflect on your food, you will realize you're going to go back to Him, because your cycle mirrors the cycle on earth, and your food is part of that cycle. So reflect on it really, really carefully. And so what the Quran is telling you to do is not just gobble the food down, but just take a moment and think of the cycle. the cycle that has brought this food to you. And so what is that cycle? أَنَّا صَبَبْنَا الْمَاءَ صَبًّا. And that was last week's lesson. When you look at your food, you'll realize this cycle. We have poured forth the water, a pouring. ثُمَّ شَقَقْنَا الْأَرْضَ شَقًّا. And then we have caused the earth to split completely open. And this is the wonder of the earth, is that it's strong and it's secure, and we walk on it and we build on it, and we don't feel that we're going to suddenly be swallowed. And yet the water penetrates it. And this delicate seed finds its home in it. And this even more delicate stalk finds its way out. And so if it were not for the fact that the earth splits, there would be no life, and the seed would never flourish, and we wouldn't exist. And so amongst the most amazing gifts of the earth is that God makes it split. And as it splits, then God brings forth, فَأَنْبَتْنَا فِيهَا حَبًّا. And so these grains come forth from it. And this is the main staple for people on earth. It is grain. وَعِنَبًا وَقَضْبًا. And vines and fresh vegetation, fruit, vegetable. وَزَيْتُونًا. And olives, all of this variety, all coming forth from this earth that split open. And the mysteries of the seed, the variety of seeds that God has brought forth. Zaytun actually means olive itself. Nakhl actually means palm trees. And so the commentators spoke, why is it that it speaks of the fruit, grapes and olives, but then it speaks of the tree instead of the date, the palm tree itself? And we'll speak about the tree next week. Next week is all about the tree within the Holy Quran. But as Ibn Ashur mentions here, it's because all of the tree was a gift for the Arabs. They would eat of its dates in all of its seasons, all of its, the date has a life cycle from being raw and being moist and then being dry, and they would eat it through all of its cycles. The seed of the date would be food for their animals. From the stalk of the palm tree, they would snap it and they would get drink from it, and then they would make paper from what they would from what they could carve away from its stalk. They would make rope from what they could carve away from it. They would make their furniture and from its wood and their doors. And so there was so much they made out of this tree, of the gifts then that comes forth from the ground. وَحَدَائِقَ غُلْبًا. And luscious gardens. Ghulb actually is a reference to a thick neck. Again, summoning this harmony between you and the seed, you and the earth. The thick-necked tree, like the thick-necked, person, the stalk of the tree representing a part of man. وَفَاكِهَةً وَأَبًّا. Fakiha is a word we haven't dwelt on so much. Fakiha means fruit. Thamara is a word we saw earlier that also represents fruit. The difference is in Arabic, thamara literally just means produce. So really, thamara is all produce that comes from the earth. It could be we call fruit now, and it could be, like we've seen here, olive, we've seen grains. All of this is thamara. All of this is produce. But amongst produce is a particular kind of produce that we eat only for joy and entertainment. So all the words from the root fakaha return back to entertainment and joy. Fukaha is, in modern Arabic, comedy. Tafakkur is, entertainment. You could say joke telling. And so fakiha is the food that comes from the ground just for our pleasure. We don't need it for sustenance. We don't need it for survival. We eat it just for the enjoyment of it. And these are the sweet fruits that come from the ground just to please us. So this is the fakiha. Wa abba, food for our animals. مَتَاعًا لَكُمْ وَلِأَنْعَامِكُمْ. And so what this passage is saying, it speaks on a variety of levels. First of all, if you look at your food and you reflect on all of the cycle that it's going through, you'll realize how much you owe God, how many cycles have occurred so that this food could come to your table, how much you owe him in thanks. So why don't you fulfill what he's ordered you? You also will realize another angle, that your food represents a life cycle, a dead earth producing produce as rain comes down so you can eat it. That life cycle is the mirror of your cycle of life to death to regeneration. So your food represents your own return to God, your own resurrection, because that's what the cycle of life is. So why don't you hasten to obey him? And finally, taking your mind and your heart and your soul through reflecting on your food in such a way is what you're ordered to do. And you're not reflecting on food in such a way is you're disobeying your Lord. This passage speaks not so much about the earth itself, but about that splitting again. Because what the splitting of the earth occurs because there's another splitting taking place beneath the earth. And that splitting is the splitting that takes place out of the sight of man, out of the control of man. It's God's splitting the seed. And so God ascribes it purely to his own majesty. Verily, God the majestic, he's the one, he's the only one. He splits the seed. And he splits the nawa. So the hab is the seed of grain. And the nawa is the seed that comes out of a fruit, whether it's out of the date or out of the grape. These seeds are dead, have no meaning of life in them whatsoever. We bury them in the ground where we have no control, and God is the one who splits it. He splits it, and out of it, he brings forth something living. This lifeless, dry, hard substance, suddenly a gentle, delicate, soft, vulnerable, moist life comes out. And then we've seen in the previous verse, the very earth he will cause to shift. So this little gentle thing can come forth. That is God. And he also brings the dead from the living. If you look just in this life which is coming out, he'll make from it a fruit which is living. But in the fruit is a seed which is dead, a lifeless substance. He'll bring forth a fruit, but outside of it might be a sheath, which is dead. It's a lifeless, dead husk around it. And so the commentators speak about that the very fruit that comes out has aspects which you describe as dead, aspects you would describe as living. And that's the cycle of the seed. And that, of course, is the cycle of man. This is the constant message. You, in your cycle, are the cycle of the seed. That is God. So why do you worship other than him? He also splits the heavens. So not only now is the seed the symbol of your cycle, but the seed is the symbol of the heavenly cycle. What happens is we have nothing but darkness, and God splits the darkness and allows light to peer forth, and that is dawn. And then the light just pushes throughout the day until night takes over again. And so in the cycle of night and day, night is the predominant, if you like, or night is the absence. And it's God splitting which gives you your day. But then he doesn't leave the day there because the night comes back to give you peace. All of this is in an order. So here now the splitting of the seed as a symbol of the whole heavenly order, as well as a symbol of your order. In this passage, we are introduced to variety on earth, and then a variety in man. Again, the mirror, man and earth as mirrors of each other. Here in this passage, God sends down water from the sky, And all sorts of fruit come forth. And this is also described elsewhere within the Holy Quran. It's just one water, but how many fruits come out? Some are sweeter than others, some are larger than others, some have different colors, some are vibrant, some are dull. And the water is one. But what's different? The earth is different, and the seeds are different, and God controls and governs all of this variety. So the mountains are layered, and the mountains have hues. And then we come out to the other variety of all those creatures that feed off of this earth. They are also varied in their hues, in their colors, in their forms. And then only those of knowledge truly have awe of God. This very powerful Quranic passage. إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهَ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاء. The only ones who truly, truly have awe of God are the learned, the ulama. What kind of ilm, what kind of knowledge is this passage speaking of? It's a knowledge of God through regarding his handiwork, his creation, his revelation, looking at the universe and finding God in it, finding God's order. What did we see in the previous passage? That God is mighty, finding his might in the universe. God is all-knowing, finding his knowledge in the universe. This is what it means to be an alim. Find God's gentleness in the universe. Find God's wisdom in the universe. The world is this mirror, and we have to find God in it. Find God in the variety and in the unicity of that water, like the unicity of his command. He says, be, and a multitude splits forth. In this entire order, those who know God in it, they are the ulama, and they are the ones who are the most humbled before him, the most awestruck by him, the most driven to him, the most mindful of him, and only them. Inna Allaha azizun ghafur. And that's what they see of him. He's mighty and he's forgiving. A few verses later, it speaks about the book, and it speaks about three different types of people. Continuing on this parallel we saw last time, rain as revelation. So rain comes down to the earth and a variety is brought forth. And man is like the earth, like we saw last time, and like we're stressing this time, man is like the earth. And so as the water of revelation comes down on us, how we respond in variety like the earth responds in variety to the rain. Some people respond to this book by wronging themselves. They don't follow it, they turn away from it, like a dead, parched earth, as we saw last time. Some of them respond to the rain in a sort of balanced way. Sometimes they're on, sometimes they're off, sometimes they're following, sometimes they're turning away. They try and then they fall, and they turn and then they turn away. Like an earth that brought forth a small sparkle or a small greenery, but then it died. And some of them are racing and racing and racing to all good, like that earth that produces a garden that is lush and ever producing fruit. Earth's variety mirroring man's variety. And here we have the idea. It's a flip of the metaphor. The metaphor I've presented so far is the life cycle of the earth causes you to reflect on your own cycle, i.e., your resurrection. Here we're flipping it. Your cycle mirrors the earth cycle, and both of them are teaching you about the resurrection. So if you want to know that resurrection is real, think about your cycle, not the earth cycle. And then we'll come to the earth cycle second. What is your cycle? You were made from this lifeless earth. So if you can come from the lifeless earth once, of course you can do it again. Secondly, The one who can produce life from the lifeless earth, he can do it again. What came from this lifeless earth? So this is Adam. Adam was created from this lifeless earth, and within Adam was produced all the material for all other people, i.e., all of us were in Adam. All of our material, meaning our, whatever you want to call it, our genetic material, the whole, whatever code that codifies me and codifies you, that was all in Adam. And so that turab was, that first fashioning was a fashioning of all of man. So we made you from turab, and in that turab, we produced that seed, that moist seed through which Adam reproduced, which was that droplet, that sperm droplet. And then this went through its cycles to a lump of flesh, shaped and unshaped. And then it was taken back to stay in the womb for an appointed time. We're going to see this idea right at the end with the rising. The earth is keeping all of the human dead, but a time will come when the earth will flush them out, will push them out. And so your cycle now represents that resurrection cycle. And then we brought you forth as children, and then you grew, and some were young, and some came to age. And then this, just like the cycle of the earth cycle that we witness, is one of life, flourishing, drying, and death. And so you and your own cycle represent the cycle of the vegetation of earth. You are a little seed that gets planted in a safe place, and it has a qarar, it has a sort of lodging in the womb, just like the seed has a lodging in the earth. And then you are thrown out, if you like, to be children. And the children grow just like the greenery grows. And just like the greenery will come to die and dry up again and wilt after its fullness, similarly you will flourish if you don't die young. But as you start to wilt, you will go back to your childhood again. You will forget after remembering. You will become ignorant after you knew. You will become slow after you used to be quick. You will struggle to walk, just like you struggled to walk in the beginning. The end of your life mirrors the very first of your life. And then you perish. And then you go back where? Right into the earth. Just like the life cycle of the seed. It flourishes, it produces fruit, it dies, the seed goes in the earth, and then you have repeat. So if you, in your cycle on earth, are just like the cycle of the seed on earth, and just like the seed will go back into the ground and you go back into the ground, isn't it seemly that you should also come out again to fulfill that cycle, just like the cycle of the seed? So this is a flip of the metaphor. Not the greenery representing you, but you representing the greenery. And that's why then it jumps to the original metaphor we've been discussing, which is the greenery. You see a dead, lifeless earth. When we put water on it, it shakes. It suddenly quivers and it grows. And all kind of resplendent growth comes forth. And the verse started, if you doubt the resurrection, look at your cycle and look at the earth cycle. Then it says right at the end, that is because Allah is Al-Haq. Al-Haq means the truth. It means the stable, the unchanging, the ever unchanging, the ever permanent, the ever real. What does it mean to be truly real? It means that there's no change. There's no modification. It's ever true, ever real. And the only real is God. Everything else has a cycle. Everything else has a beginning and an end. Everything else has a flourishing and a wilting. Only God is real. Only God is truth. Everything else has to move. So Allah is Al-Haq. Allah is the real. And He is the one who brings the dead to life. You and your cycle will have to come forward again to its conclusion. God has power over everything. The hour will come when you will come forth again, and all in the graves will be sent forth. Speaking about the end of this cycle, because the cycle of man ended in this passage with old age. It said you will reach the old age. So what happens at the complete wilting of man's cycle? And also it said some of you die before. If you go to the English, some die young, some live on. But what happens after that? What completes the cycle? What completes the cycle is burial. And so one of the most fascinating stories in the Holy Quran, the first knowledge acquired by man on earth is within the description of the Holy Quran at least, is the knowledge of burial. Because in the story of man comes down and man is told to be God's representative. The Quran doesn't discuss much about, in any explicit way at least, the life of Adam and Adam's family on earth. Rather, Adam's story is the story of the garden. The Quran describes something about Adam's children, namely the transgression of one of the children against the other, until one killed the other. And so you have one son of Adam killing the other out of jealousy, because God accepted the offering. And then, so what you have, if you were to picture this crime, it's the first ever murder, the first crime we know about in the story of man. You have this man's brother, he's on the ground, lifeless. And then you know what happens to man when they become lifeless. They become unseemly, foul, repulsive, or the body is about to become. It's about to decompose. So there's this unseemliness of this, what was a very seemly human. And so the first knowledge that God teaches man, within the story at least of the Holy Quran, is the knowledge of burial. And it gets taught in the form of this raven, this dark bird. And some say that the dark bird was chosen just to mirror the darkness of the event of death, i.e., life is gone. And we are moving on to the sadness of the departure of life. And so the black bird has come, and the black bird starts digging in the earth. And it teaches him that this human body, when it's animate, it belongs on the surface. But when it becomes inanimate, we have to let the earth embrace it again. Just like it's from the earth that the first form of man came, it's only to the earth, only to the embrace of earth that we can honor man, so that his unseemliness is not on the surface, but it's within the earth. And actually within the earth will embrace him. In the words of the Quran, the unbelievers say, إِذَا ضَلَلْنَا فِي الْأَرْضِ, the man will become lost in the earth, because as he decomposes again, he goes back into what it was from which the first man came, which is earth. He feeds the earth again, the earth which fed his father. And so upon observing this is when this man became remorseful. This is the first tawbah on earth that we have been told about in the Holy Quran. And it arrives after being taught the meaning of burial, which is part of realizing the significance of life. That life is not, it's when it goes, when life leaves this form, it no longer has a purpose except to feed back into the earth. The cycle is complete. And so he realized what he had done at that stage. He realized he had to honor his brother in death, to cover the shame, which is the lifeless body. And then he became remorseful after that. I called it the first tawbah. The Quran doesn't really call it tawbah. It calls it remorse. It calls it remorse. And the hadith actually, the hadith says that that he has the sin of every murder afterwards. because he has inaugurated murder. Coming back to the fruits of the earth, the earth is our source of food, which we've seen earlier. And so the earth will be our source of our test. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promises that He will test us with deficiency in the earth. وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ, Allah says, I swear that we will wear you out. Bala means to wear something out. Wearing out, wear it out, wear it out, wear it out. So you see something of its quality. So we will wear you out with something of fear, hunger, loss of property, loss of life, and of interest here, loss of crops. Again, you can see what I said earlier, thamara, as a description of simply crop, produce in general, and fakiha as fruit in particular. And so there will be part of the cycle of the earth is there will be times when there's not enough, or when there's, what I will say is, we can say not enough, we could say not as much as we would like, but there is a time of want. Times of want are part of the natural cycle of earth, because this is the test and Allah has promised it. And all we can do to face it is what? It continues to be patient and give great glad tidings to the patient. Those whom when a calamity afflicts them, they say, we are just Allah's and to Him we are going to return. These are the ones who are given blessings and mercy. If we take it back to our discussion last week about conserving, the Quranic sort of message of conservation, if you like, how do you conserve and preserve the order that's around you? We'll understand that part of the order is sometimes there will be want. There will be times when there will not be crop. There will be times when there will not be the rain that we expected. And so we have to understand that's part of a natural cycle as well. And how do we respond? It's through, in this verse, through patience, through turning to God and realizing it's God's order. It's not for us to be bitter about it. And as we do that, what comes down to us? Mercy. And what is mercy embodied, as we saw last time? It is rain. And so it goes back to what we said last time. If we want to maintain the healthy order around us, we have to maintain the healthy order between ourselves and between us and God. Last week we saw seeking forgiveness as a way to summon the rain. Here we are seeing being patient, not complaining, turning to God and accepting God's plan, essentially, as a way to summon the blessings to earth again. Another way that we connect to the produce of the earth. Here we saw produce as test, and we've seen previously produce as cycles. Here, what interests me in this passage is a debt. Produce brings with it a debt that we owe to God. And what is the debt? Is that when the earth brings out its food, we are told to eat, like we saw right at the beginning of this set of verses, eat. We're told to eat from it, but pay its due on the day of the harvest. So what is the due of the earth? It's charity. It's not considered acceptable for someone to expend effort on the earth and then for God to bring forth that miracle, which is this life that comes out through the cycle that we've been studying, and then to say, oh, great, this is all mine, and then just to take it home. That is considered unacceptable. And so from the earliest verses of the Quran, there's been this idea that when you harvest, you have to give some of it to the needy. That is the due of the earth. That is, if you like, the tax that you owe to God because He gave you produce in the earth. And so there's a general injunction. This is a Meccan verse in Surah Al-An'am. There's a general idea. The Quranic number is wrong. This is 6. It's Surah Al-An'am. This is a Meccan verse, but then later on in Medina, this became part of the system of zakat. That within zakat, one must pay a tenth or a fifth of the produce of the earth as zakat, whenever the earth produces, and it must go to the needy. And so there is a duty then that we owe, in addition to gratitude, in addition to reflecting on the lessons of this cycle, there's something else as well now, which is caring for each other. Those who have must care for those who do not have. Otherwise, they are withholding the due that they owe to God by His bringing forth. And if you withhold the due, if you go back to the earliest verses we've been seeing, you upset the order. As you upset the order, then ruin comes to earth. So you can see a whole schema of what it means to conserve the blessings of this order. Part of the schema now is making sure that those who need are given from what the earth produces. If we withhold a portion of the produce from those who need, we are upsetting the order, and we will see a consequence that will come from this upsetting the order. Very good. So those were some themes about the earth, its produce, its cycles, and particular duties of contemplation, of gratitude, of patience, and of charity. A last theme which completes this cycle is the theme of the resurrection. And this will mirror the story of the seed, as we've been seeing. So man has a cycle in earth, which is the seed that's planted in the womb, that gives birth to the child, the person that gets old, then withers, dies, and goes back in the earth. So that's a cycle we observe here. And then there's the larger cycle of man, which is that once you go into the earth, then you'll come out again. And this mirrors the cycle of the seed. And how is this mirroring represented here? With the verb we saw earlier on today. The verse that we saw earlier on, it said, look at your food and reflect. Reflect on what? That we poured down water from the sky. Then it said, وَشَقَقْنَا الْأَرْضَ شَقًّا. We made the earth split so that this produce could grow, so that whatever the seed has to offer comes out, and whatever it needs can go down. So similarly, the earth is storing something else that's precious. And on Judgment Day, Allah will make it split. So it will produce it again, just like it produced it the first time. And what is this precious seed that the earth is storing? It's every human soul that is within it. Every human that's ever lived is in the earth. Every human that's ever lived is in the earth. You see me pausing for a moment. I'm just reflecting on those who are in the sea. And over time, everything will mix with the seabed, the life cycle, the animals. So it all comes down ultimately to form the substance of the earth. Every human being is in the earth. And so when the time comes, just like it splits for the seed, the earth will split. Tashaqqaq, there's a sort of emphatic splitting. The earth is responding, and the earth is splitting open. The earth is responding, the earth is splitting open, and they are running out. Like a seed that splits forth quickly. ذَلِكَ حَشْرٌ عَلَيْنَا يَسِيرٌ. That gathering is very, very easy for us. Here we have Surah Al-Zalzala, which describes the event that leads to that splitting, and the event is the shaking of the earth. In fact, if we go to the next one, and then we'll come back to Surah Al-Zalzala. This shaking, it represents, although the language is not used within the Holy Quran, but it represents almost a form of labor. Because just like we saw the seed of man, when it goes into the womb, there's a violent convulsion that is required to push him out. And so similarly, all the human souls that are under the ground, there's a violent convulsion that has to take place so that they are all thrown out. So that they're all thrown out. وَإِذَا الْأَرْضُ مُدَّتْ, when the earth is leveled. And so that's partly the shaking. It levels the mountains, it levels everything. And then the earth, and here the earth is an active doer. It's as if the earth is doing it. The earth is throwing out whatever is in it. وَتَخَلَّتْ, and the earth is exerting extreme effort to become empty. So you really get this idea of, again, the most similar parallel from what we've seen earlier is like labor. It's exerting effort, come out, come out, come out, come out, so it can be emptied. وَأَذِنَتْ لِرَبِّهَا, it's just listening to its Lord. وَحُقَّتْ, and it deserves that it should be doing such. And it's just trying out, 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 out. Everyone come out. And so this Surah Al-Zalzala describes that earthquake. إِذَا زُلْزِلَتِ الْأَرْضُ زِلْزَالَهَا, when the earth shakes, it's real shaking. It's ultimate shaking. The shaking that was destined for the earth. Everything else is just a bit of it. Every other earthquake is just a bit of a shaking, but we're talking about the earth's earthquake. When the earth gets the earth's earthquake, the earthquake it's been waiting for. وَأَخْرَجَتِ الْأَرْضُ أَثْقَالَهَا, and the earth will throw out all of its weights and burdens. وَقَالَ الْإِنسَانُ مَا لَهَا, and the human beings have never seen the earth behave in such a way before. Which human beings are these? Well, it depends on, because there are some human beings who are under the earth as the earth starts its shaking, the shaking of resurrection. And there are other humans who are on the earth. Sometimes the Quran folds up the two events of the end. Because first of all, there is what's referred to as the first blowing of the trumpet, which is the destruction. And then there's the second blowing, which is the resurrection. And so the shaking here is the shaking of the destruction, but it merges into the resurrection by this fourth verse, as we're about to see. So when the earth shakes, it's shaking, and it brings out its burdens, and men who are so when we look at this first part, the first event of judgment, which is the breaking of the world's order, there'll be people who will be alive when judgment day comes, people who are there on the last day when this earth is about to be all ruined, and they'll observe an event they've never seen the like of, an earthquake they've never seen the like of, and any observer who is there will be wondering what on earth is happening to her. Why is she shaking like this? وَقَالَ الْإِنسَانُ مَا لَهَا, what is happening to it? What is she doing? يَوْمَئِذٍ تُحَدِّثُ أَخْبَارَهَا, on that day she will speak her news, because her Lord will have inspired her. And this is merging then into the coming forth, the resurrection. As the earth splits out on the resurrection, the human beings that are within it, it will speak its news. It will explain what's happening, because God will have inspired her. And this goes back to something we hinted at last time, which was that the earth is observant, just like we saw last time the sky was observant. The earth is a witness to what's happening. The earth is a witness to every crime. The earth is a witness to every good deed. And it will speak on that day as a witness to what's happening on its back, because God has inspired her. So here, earth, in the final story, what is earth being described as? Here as obedient, doing God's bidding, spitting out man, whether he wishes to come out or not. And then ultimately testifying. For those who were good, it will be a welcome witness. And for those who did bad, it will be a case against them. And so earth will get earth's justice. If we saw a passage last time, the earth and the skies didn't cry for the criminals. So the earth has its own time to get its justice, or to be a witness to justice. And that is the final story of man and earth. The final exchange between man and earth is the story of justice. And so those were the themes that we wanted to cover, we were able to cover in the time that we had today, about man and earth. And so we'll stop here, inshallah. We'll take any questions or comments that people had. It's a very sunny day today where I'm sitting. Let me just open up the document. There's a link where you can go to enter your questions. That should be shared in the chat. So I'm just opening up this document. Okay, so we have two questions here so far. How can the splitting of things be related to the dead heart? And do you have any advice for someone who feels as though recent events have shaken one's faith and is fearful of losing one's faith, or feels like one's heart is dying on coming face to face with the staunchly deadened heart of a family member who can't see the beauty of God? I ask Allah to strengthen you, to strengthen me, to strengthen all of us. What we've learned from this layering of metaphors that we're seeing, that really are at the bedrock of much of what the Quran is telling us about ourselves, it is that we are like the seed. And the seed doesn't have the metaphor of the seed is a helpless metaphor. I mean, the seed just stays there, and it is extremely needy. All it can do is direct itself to God and turn to God for its nurturing. So that aspect of the metaphor, what we learn from that is we just have to turn to God. It's not for us to claim guidance for ourselves or to claim ability for ourselves. It's not for us to have techniques. What it is for us is to turn to Allah. And unlike the physical seed, which relies on a rain that sometimes comes and sometimes doesn't come, the rain that we need is the rain that's always coming. And it is the mercy of God. It's the kindness of God. It's the guidance of God. It's the teachings of Allah in the revelation. So the guidance is always coming, unlike the physical rain. And so all we have to do is direct ourselves and we'll find it. Ask Him and He's there. Take one step to Him and He comes to you running. And so in the first instance, all that we have to do is this direction. And the rest is in His hands, and He will do it. He will always do it if you turn to Him. He will always do it if you turn to Him. Sometimes you feel these dry moments, and they last for longer than you would have liked. It does not mean God hasn't heard your prayer, but He wants you to learn something from these moments. Maybe He wants you to learn to appreciate when He does give you a spiritual closeness to Him. He wants you to appreciate it, to value it, so you'll cultivate it. You don't take it for granted anymore. You realize its worth. Maybe He wants you to learn that you have to direct yourself to doing what He wants you to do, regardless of whether you feel this spiritual fruit or not. I do it for His sake, not for the sake of something that comes back to you. This also is like the metaphor of the seed, but from the point of view of the farmer. The farmer can't control anything in the growth But what he has to do is practice. He has to split the earth with his techniques. He has to plant the seed. He has to cover it over. He has to water it. He has to feed it. He has to care for it. When it starts growing, he has to ensure that that it's protected from whatever changes in the elements. He has to protect it from. There is effort. And so what we have to do from the other side of the metaphor is we have to exert effort. And that entails ultimately following the sunnah. Whether you feel a spiritual and life in that very moment or not, you follow, you exert the effort. And sometimes God creates a small drought in the heart just to really bring out our sincerity, to do it for his sake. Whether you feel that sort of internal flourishing or not, you just do it for his sake. You do it for his sake. And as that ground of sincerity is realized, then a huge growth comes when you might not even expect it from the gift of Allah. So I could see, as you can see, the metaphor of the seed, we can relate to it in two ways. We are both at once the seed and at once the farmer, at once helpless, at once fully active. But throughout, the real growth is all from him, Jalla Jalaluhu. That's all I can say, really. And how do the splitting of things be related to the dead heart? One way, and that is hope. We say, قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ الْفَلَقِ. We seek refuge in the Lord of the splitting. And what is the splitting? It's the splitting of hope. That out of that dead, lifeless seed, he produces food for everything on the planet. Out of that dark, scary night, as the surah itself says, وَمِن شَرِّ غَاسِقٍ إِذَا وَقَبْ, from the evil of the darkness, which sort of penetrates everything and you're scared. He's the one that splits it and brings the night. He splits the ignorance and brings forth the guidance. He can split the dead heart and bring forth guidance. أَوَمَنْ كَانَ مَيْتًا فَأَحْيَيْنَاهُ وَجَعَلْنَا لَهُ نُورًا يَمْشِي بِهِ فِي النَّاسِ كَمَنْ مَثَلُهُ فِي الظُّلُمَاتِ لَيْسَ بِخَارِجٍ مِنْهَا. Have you considered two people? One person was dead, but we brought him to life. And we gave him a light with which he walks amongst men. And there's another one who's just drowning in darknesses and he's not coming out of them. They're not the same. The dead heart can come to life. By what? By the power of Rabbil Falaq, the one who's the Lord of the splitting. And so if there's anything that we can learn between splitting and the dead heart, it's the lesson of hope. He can split the seed. He can split. He can open the heart. He can bring forth its goodness. لَيْسَ عَلَيْكَ هُدَاهُمْ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ يَهْدِي مَنْ يَشَاءُ. You don't have to stress and fret over the matter of guidance. God is the one who guides. But he produces the guidance in the most amazing of places. So that's for me the falaq as this most incredible metaphor. Inna Allah faliqul habbi wan nawa. And that's why the dua in Qul a'udhu bi rabbil falaq is so powerful. It's just one event. Qul a'udhu bi rabbil falaq. That's the only trait of God that you're summoning for protection from everything. Look at the surah. Qul a'udhu bi rabbil falaq. I seek refuge in the Lord of the splitting. Min sharri ma khalaq. From the evil and harm of everything he's created. If he does the falaq, if he does the splitting, that's enough for me to know that he has the power to protect me from everything he's created. وَمِن شَرِّ غَاسِقٍ إِذَا وَقَبْ. From the darkness that penetrates everything. وَمِن شَرِّ النَّفَّاثَاتِ فِي الْعُقَدِ. And from the evil of the sorcerers and the people who engage in the dark arts. وَمِن شَرِّ حَاسِدٍ إِذَا حَسَدٍ. And from the evil of the envious one. What is the single trait of God we're turning to? That he is the Lord of the splitting. And so it's a powerful metaphor. And if we reflect on it as a marker of God's power, his wisdom, his plan, his care, his kindness, then we enter the sphere of his protection. And we know he can protect us from all that frightens us. So that's what comes to mind anyway from the two parts of that first question. We come to the second one. We thought an idea that God gave us proof of his existence through these types of verses rather than the scientific, mathematical, or philosophical argument, because everybody can witness the growth of vegetation, look up to heavens, the birth, death, rebirth of life, etc. Everything mirrors God because it's his. It's issuing forth from him. So therefore, everything reflects him. Everything is a sign of his. Everything represents a name of his most incredible names. This includes mathematics. This includes the arguments of the mind. This includes the arguments of the scientists and includes the arguments of every cycle. So all of this is God revealing himself. Everything is God revealing himself. Every thought in your mind is God revealing himself. Everything your eye falls upon is God revealing himself. But we have to turn and direct ourselves and look. That's why it said, man is not listening to God, let him look at his food. So it's the looking to see that we have to do. There's a fascinating thing that your question brings to mind. Before I come back to what you're actually saying, because I do agree with you, but just to give a general map first. That verse that said, Inna Allaha faliqul habbi wan nawa, that verse that we saw today, verily God is the splitter of the seed. Ibn Ashur in his tafsir, he says, why does it start with inna, verily? Inna normally comes when the listener doubts what you're saying. If the listener knows, there's no need to say inna. And the pagans who the Quran was engaging with, certainly in this Meccan surah, Surah Al-An'am, they worshipped idols, yes, but they believed in the ultimate God, and they believe the ultimate God is the only one who's splitting the seed, and they don't believe anybody else is doing it. At least that's how Ibn Ashur represented the passage. So he said, it's not a point of debate for them that God is the splitter of the seed. So why say inna? Why say verily? And he said it's because they failed to reflect on what that means of God's power, God's ability to bring something living out of something dead, and therefore the fact that God is very capable of bringing forth human beings from the dead earth. Because they don't reflect on the lesson of the splitting of the seed, it's as if they doubt it or as if they don't know it, and that's why it's being emphasized. Verily God splits the seed, i.e., you are acting like you're not thinking. So let's emphasize it. That's just one point that your question reminded me of. But in short, what the question is trying to get at, aren't these more the proof within the Quran? Doesn't the Quran emphasize more the order of the universe than any sort of abstract philosophical argument? The answer is yes, but at the same time, all of those abstract arguments, if you really boil them down, all of them arise from these arguments. Meaning, if there's an argument of contingency, things were not and then they were, we discussed that today. There's a cycle on earth, there's a cycle of the human being, but Allah is haqq. Allah is not in a cycle. And so you can take out of that an argument from contingency, or an argument from origination, or an argument from temporality, however you want to phrase this sort of argument for the proof of God. So I'm trying to get at is, even those more abstract forms of argumentation, they are all embedded within these Quranic arguments. But yes, the Quranic arguments are immediate, they are familiar, they are open to all, and they don't spell it all out for you. They spell out enough for you, and they just tell you, live a life of reflection, live a life of contemplation. And you will find, just like the verses of the Quran speak to you as you go through your life differently, you learn more and more from the Quran as you live, as long as you keep thinking and approaching the Quran to learn. The Quran will never be the same book to you throughout your life. It will keep speaking to you in different ways as long as you keep looking to it in different ways. Similarly, the universe that is around us. It will keep speaking to you of God, of the reality of God, reality of your life, lessons to learn as you keep looking at it. So that's why the Quran doesn't couch its reflections in a sort of tight philosophical, or I could simply say in a particular angle. It doesn't spell out its argument. It generally calls you to look, because the lessons are many. They're not just one. It's not just a singular argument. That's all that comes to mind right now. And the last question I have here: with everything the earth has endured in the event of labor, what will become of the earth in the hereafter? Yeah, that's a really good question. I wish I could say this clearly. Unfortunately, we'll have to claim ignorance. I'm not saying the answer is not known. I think the answer is known, but I don't know it. I'll try to come back to you on this next week or the concluding week, because there's this idea that the garden, there's in Surah At-Takwir, وَأُزْلِفَتِ الْجَنَّةُ I think, anyway, that the garden is brought nigh. So the idea is the garden is high and it comes down. So the garden is not on the earth, the garden is elsewhere. There's this phrase in Surah Ibrahim, يَوْمَ تُبَدُّلُ الْأَرْضُ غَيْرَ الْأَرْضِ وَالسَّمَاوَاتِ. The earth is changed other than its form. And so one more thing about earth on Judgment Day is that the earth is utterly level. There's a lot of emphasis on the leveling of the earth on Judgment Day. That's why there's a lot of discussion on mountains being moved. And that's and the absence of crevices. Why is there such an emphasis? Because it's the plane that represents the justice of Judgment Day, that nothing is hidden. On Judgment Day, when the earth is level, there's nothing to hide behind. You can't hide behind any house. Similarly, there's no hiding of deeds. Nothing is hiddenness is absent on Judgment Day. It's the day of openness. That's why the earth is level. That's why there's no trees, no nooks, no crannies, no mountains, no houses, no homes, no tables, no chairs, nothing, no clothes. Hiddenness is gone now. It's only the day of bringing everything out. And that's why the flatness of the earth is emphasized a very great deal. So what happens thereafter? And there's a few random thoughts in my head, so I don't have a clear answer for you at this moment. That's only my ignorance. It's not that there's not a good answer on this. You probably realized, as I was struggling to explain Surah Al-Zalzala, you saw me hesitate a little bit describing who's the human being that says what's wrong with the earth, because the Quran, like I hinted at, it folds up two events. One is the event of the destruction, which can be called Judgment Day, and one is the event of the resurrection, which actually is Judgment Day. And sometimes it treats them as one day, because what is in between is negligible as far as that particular Quranic passage is concerned. And sometimes, no, they're treated as separate. And that's why sometimes it's tricky to figure out, are we describing this part or that part? And earthquake on this side, or is the earthquake on that side? So see, there's a lot of debate about the specifics of when these events occur and the order in which they will be occurring. One thing I forgot to mention, as part of the parallel between the cycle of the seed and the cycle of man, is the very specifics of the cycle of resurrection. So I've represented it in my lesson today as very general. The very fact there's a dead earth and life comes out. Similarly, God, when you're in the ground, can bring you out. That's it. It's a general metaphor. But scholars suggest that it's quite possible, and some hadiths hint at this, that it could be a more immediate metaphor. Because what is it that allows the seed to become a plant is that water comes down and then there's a growth, a gradual growth that occurs. And so some hadiths indicate, and some commentators indicate, ultimately it's unknown. What is the modality of resurrection? How is it that decomposed bodies will suddenly become composed bodies? Just like the verse we saw today, تَشَقَّقُ الْأَرْضُ عَنْهُمْ سِرَاعًا. Just to emphasize the quickness of their going to the resurrection. It's as if as soon as it opens, there they are running, just to emphasize the seriousness of Judgment Day. You don't have a moment to be bewildered. Your body is taking you to the plane of judgment. But what's the modality between you being a sort of decomposed body, if you like? Not all bodies are decomposed, as we know. The prophets are not, and saintly figures in history also, people talk about them not being decomposed, but the general mode of human bodies, what makes it full? And some descriptions that say it actually is like the seed, that there's something which comes down to earth, or there's something we can't comprehend, which has a parallel with the rain, something which has a nurturing, nourishing presence, which causes the bodies to grow again, and then the earth spits them out. And so in this idea, then, the idea of the seed producing the fruit is not just by fact a representative of the human resurrection, but almost by modality, it's a representative of human resurrection. That's how God can bring something great from something that's completely not like it, and it's concealed, by putting down some force or some nourishing rain, if you like, that encourages that growth. And there are some suggestions that is the modality of the human resurrection. Something like a rain, some kind of presence we don't know, that suddenly nurtures the bodies to grow, just like the seed. And then the earth splits and they come out fully formed. And God knows best. What the Quran argues is that there's no reason at all to believe it unlikely or impossible. Rather, it mirrors the most natural cycles on earth. And then the other part of the Quranic argument that we're not touching on in our metaphor in this course is the fact it's the natural cycle because it's just. It fulfills the other cycle of the Quran, which is the cycle of justice and wisdom. That human beings, some of whom did good and some of whom did bad, that there must be a consequence to that. And that consequence is only realized by the judgment, by people having a new life based on merit. And so that's a moral argument for resurrection, which we're not covering in this short course. All we're covering in this course, that's coming again and again and again, is the idea that it's very plausible and it's very familiar and it's not distant and there's nothing in it that is far-fetched as far as the process is concerned. And the other argument is the idea that it's the expected process because it fulfills justice and wisdom. That's all. But just to say that, yeah, in very modality, it is like the seed. So we'll stop here. Thank you all very, very much for your time. Sorry for the moments of hesitation. I was just thinking of trying to find a way to tie together our metaphors, really. It's a great topic. As you saw, it seems sometimes I was jumping from a scene to scene on the earth. It's a grand topic in the Holy Quran, but I do hope from what we've covered today, you've got keys to really approach a very larger portion of the Holy Book. Please do consider, as always, to donate to the college, to sow a seed with Cambridge Muslim College, to train and serve the Muslim community, to produce scholars and thinkers, and to serve our Muslim communities, nationally and internationally. Thank you all for your time. See you all next week, inshallah, to focus fully on the tree within the Holy Quran. وصلى الله تعالى على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.